In the spring of 1933, on a narrow New York street still stained by winter soot and salt, an eviction notice was pressed flat against a tenement door with practiced efficiency. There was nothing unusual about the act. By that point, dispossessory notices had become part of the city's daily rhythm, appearing faster than they could be removed, driven by months of unpaid rent that followed layoffs along the waterfront and in the factories that depended on it. Municipal court calendars and daily newspapers routinely noted hundreds of such filings each week. The paper bore the name Antonio Russo and an amount that had accumulated quietly since late 1932, when shipping traffic thinned and the docks began turning men away. Russo had worked the piers by habit and strength, hired day to day at the shape-ups, paid in cash when there was work to be done, a system documented repeatedly in waterfront investigations of the period. By March, he had been idle for months, standing each morning with dozens of others in caps and heavy coats, waiting for jobs that rarely materialized and usually went elsewhere. Inside the apartment, his wife kept the rooms in order out of routine rather than optimism. The kitchen was scrubbed, bedding aired despite the cold, and the children learned to speak softly, aware of how sound traveled through thin walls and how attention could be drawn by noise. The building itself was old and crowded, built before the turn of the century, with shared landings, hallway taps, and cold deliveries that marked daily life. Features frequently described in housing surveys of Lower Manhattan. When the notice appeared, it was read not as a private warning, but as a signal to the entire block, where unpaid rent and threatened removal were already familiar conditions rather than exceptions. The information spread without announcement. Neighbors paused on the stairs, reread the paper, fixed the name and date in memory, and passed the knowledge along in brief exchanges at the entrance and on the sidewalk. A grocer on the corner, whose customers increasingly relied on credit and bought only essentials, closed early that night, anticipating the morning to come. Such informal adjustments were noted in contemporary social work reports that tracked how small businesses absorbed the strain of mass unemployment. When Russo returned from the river without work, people arrived without invitation, filling the apartment with damp coats and the smell of coal smoke. They spoke in overlapping accents shaped by migration and labor, recalling other evictions nearby, earlier winters, and what had been done then when relief was scarce and charity unreliable. Some had attended meetings organized by unemployed councils, while others relied only on memory and proximity. There was no formal meeting and no written plan, only the shared understanding that if nothing intervened, the furniture would be on the sidewalk within days and the family would be scattered wherever space could be found. The marshals arrived shortly after sunrise, accompanied by police whose faces were familiar from routine patrols. The process followed established practice recorded in city regulations. Papers checked, lock examined, a brief allowance to remove what could be carried. Chairs came out first, then a table worn smooth by daily use, then a mattress bent to clear the narrow door. A bureau followed, a drawer sliding open to reveal folded work shirts and pay stubs from years when steadier labor had still been possible. Russo's children stood close to their mother as their possessions were arranged carefully on the pavement. Then, without shouting or argument, neighbors stepped forward. Hands appeared beneath the furniture, and everything was carried back inside, past the officials and through a door not yet closed, the movement steady enough to leave no clear moment of confrontation, an approach described in police blotters and press accounts as nonviolent resistance or simply interference. The pattern repeated over the next several days. Each morning the officials returned, and each morning the building answered. Furniture went out and came back in, sometimes more than once, as orders were issued, deferred, and renewed. Children carried lamps and boxes, trusted with items that could break. Older men directed traffic in the stairwell to prevent injury. Russo stood aside more often than not, watching as others took on the labor he could no longer reliably find at the docks. Warnings were issued and ignored, and reports were filed that did not fit neatly into forms designed for compliance. The law remained intact on paper, but in practice it slowed under the weight of collective refusal, pressed back by people who understood how far enforcement could be stretched before it faltered. A tension acknowledged in internal correspondence between city officials during the winter of 1932-33. As the days passed, the cost of holding that line became clearer. Shopkeepers lost hours they could not spare, and neighbors working irregular shifts in laundries, bakeries, and service jobs grew exhausted. Officials returned with less patience and more scrutiny from supervisors. Emergency relief offices authorized under new federal and state measures were beginning to open, and rumors of assistance circulated, but intake was uneven and delays were common, as early case files attest. Each evening, when the furniture was once again inside, the rooms felt provisional, secured for the night, uncertain beyond it. Gratitude was expressed quietly, with the understanding that solidarity, like physical endurance, could be worn down. On the 9th morning, the street was quieter. The notice was gone, torn down by someone who left no explanation. The marshals did not appear, and the furniture remained where it stood. Nothing had been formally resolved. The debt still existed, and steady work had not returned to the piers. What remained was the memory of what the neighborhood had done together, before tenant protections were strengthened and before relief fully reached the streets. In the months that followed, as assistance arrived unevenly and stability was promised more than delivered, the episode was recalled without ceremony. A brief, precarious interval in which ordinary people held the line as long as they could and learned, without illusion, both the power and the limits of collective action. If you found this story meaningful, please consider liking this video. It helps these quiet, often forgotten stories reach more people. Subscribe to Ordinary Lives, Extraordinary Times to stay connected to stories of everyday people who lived through moments that shaped history. Each life mattered. Each story deserves to be remembered, but we'd also love to hear from you. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Our community spans across countries, generations, and experiences, all connected by a shared respect for history and the lives within it. Thank you for watching, and thank you for helping keep these stories alive.